Why do we still need teachers? I asked this question as a teacher myself, and I freely admit that essentially all of the vast collection of human knowledge is now available freely to anybody who wants it. You can learn a lot of stuff without a teacher. Now, certainly we need someone there in the morning to meet the kids when the parents go to work, and that's a big part of the job. The first thing I do is open the door and get the kids inside to keep them safe and emotionally safe. If I'm not there for the 30 people waiting outside the door, it's a big problem. Do not underestimate the value of a person who can show up on time and alert every day and be in a good enough mood to want to talk to 30 high schoolers or 30 middle schoolers or 30 elementary school students. And this is all before the lessons are to be delivered. The students come to us with a lot of emotion, and we also have to tend to this. We tend to them spiritually. We are taking them on a journey to a place they've never been before. They're going to be learning and changing and trying to extend themselves in ways that they haven't done and learn things they've never learned and then perform. And so we have to help them emotionally on that challenge and keep them enthusiastic. So at this point, you might be thinking, that sounds a lot like a coaching relationship. So is it the case that a teacher is very much a coach? And there is something to it, but the teacher does something more than that. They have to stoke the passion of the students. That the teacher is supposed to stoke the fire of passion to make the students aware that the world is an interesting place and it's exciting and you would want to learn about it. There are things worth knowing and it's worth your time and attention. I want to give you as an example one of my favorite things to teach. This is a great experiment because you can do it right now while I'm talking to you. Take out your arm and leave it limply in front of you like this, and then take your other hand and place it on top with your thumb just below your wrist. Relax your fingers and then squeeze, and you will notice that your fingers on your free hand actually close like that. And this is going to teach us how muscles work. If somebody next to you is kind enough, they might lend you an arm that you can try it on theirs, and you can actually compel other people's fingers to close against their will. Well, they have to give you permission by relaxing. So how does that work? The body is a mechanism, and it is subject to the laws of physics, that is the pushes and pulls of the forces. In particular, muscles pull on tendons, and tendons pull on bones, and that's what causes skeletal movement. And because it's a mechanism, we can harness it and take control of it, mechanically speaking. So what is it about these laws of physics that excite me so much? I can remember a time when I didn't know what physics was, or that physics was a science. And I noticed with great concern that a lot of the things people were asking me to learn and believe, they had not taken great care to make sure that they weren't wrong or that they weren't misunderstanding the situation. In particular, I was in chemistry the previous year. I actually thought I would be a chemistry teacher at this point in my life. And they had taught us about Lewis dots and that the electrons come in these groups of 8. And that I was supposed to believe that this was true, even though I couldn't quite imagine it or understand why they thought it was true. But it did help us with the experiments and predict the periodic table. It was useful to know this, but I didn't believe it. And then when I did take physics, I said, oh, this is the subject that I always wanted to study. This is the science that I've been looking for. I just didn't know what it was called. It's called physics. And it's based on the mathematical principles of Euclid, that we move from truth to truth without skipping any steps and using mathematics all the way along the way so that we're sure we're right and that we're not making a mistake. I'm reminded of something I read only a few years ago. I was reading for leisure I was reading the journal of Isaac Newton when he was a student, his own personal student log, and he makes a statement that goes like this: "It is better that we observe the effects of one object on another than the effects of those objects on ourselves, because then we are less likely to make a mistake in what we are observing." And in that sentence, he essentially defines the subject of physics, the science that is physics, that we watch two objects interact and make observations and predictions. Now, despite his role and place of high status in the history of physics, Isaac Newton doesn't always take his own advice. And he performs an experiment later that actually on himself. In fact, he performs a lot of experiments on himself. And here's one that you can do right now. If you take a free hand and look off to the side with your eyes, and with that free hand touch the side of your eye that you're not looking at, the back side of your eye, you can actually see a tiny little dot of vision appear. And this is called Newton's eye poke experiment. And he used this as evidence that light, the light that we see, is a stream of particles that comes and slams into the back of our eyes and causes a pressure, and what we see is pressure. So this is Newton providing evidence for his hypothesis, and he's very, very wrong. That is not how we see. That is not what we see. Light does not make pressure on the back of our eyes. Newton is detecting a problem in the eye. And actually, we can learn a lot from him, because even though his experiment is wrong, it's illustrative that if you perform the experiment on yourself, you might get the wrong results. You might think something is true that's not. What actually is true is that light waves damage proteins in cells that are neurons that have specific proteins that are sensitive to light. They're called rods that see brightness and cones that see color. You may have heard this before. The protein in the rods is called rhodopsin, and it's damaged usually by blue light, and the damage, chemical damage, is sensed by the neurons. I'm delighted to report that in the cones, the proteins are called conopsins, and there are 3 different conopsin proteins in most people. You might know if you're one of these people who only has 2, you're probably male and having trouble identifying colors, because color blindness is usually in males. Anyways, there's 3 of these conopsins. So that's Newton making a mistake that he warned us against. Whenever we do an experiment, we have to admit that we are part of the experiment, that we are interfering with it slightly. It's called the observer effect. So, for example, if you wanted to observe gorillas at the zoo and make notes on them, you might have gorillas noticing that you're there, and you would be causing this problem. So every time we do an experiment, the observer is part of the experiment. I'm going to do another experiment for you, and I'm going to try not to interfere with it too much myself. This is Galileo's hypothesis. All objects fall at the same rate regardless of mass. And for my 2 objects, I have a piece of paper and a book, and I'm going to drop them both, and all objects will fall at the same rate. That's the hypothesis. Are you ready for this? All right, here we go. Oh no, did you witness? It wasn't true. All right, so by direct experiment, we saw that the paper did not fall as fast as the book. As an explanation for that, I invite you to take your hands and rub them together like this. Rub a little bit harder to get more friction. Good. Now just one hand. And you think I'm joking, but you can actually feel the air friction pretty well right now. You can feel that indeed there is air friction, and that is what was slowing down the piece of paper. So what we want to do is use the book to push the paper downward through the air. So if I set it like this, I can get the book to push the paper down, and that is not very satisfying because the book pushed the paper. Everybody knows that that's what happened. So that does not prove the hypothesis is correct. What we want to see is the piece of paper falling without being pushed. And I'm going to show you that it is possible if you put the paper on top of the book. Now, as it falls, the book will push the air out of the way, and the piece of paper can fall without hitting any air while it falls. Are you ready for this? Okay, here we go. There it is. A piece of paper can fall as fast as a book. It is possible. You might complain about this experiment. You might say, well, the book created a vacuum effect that kept the paper stuck to it. Yes, good job. It is a vacuum, that's right. In a vacuum, a piece of paper would fall as fast as a book. Well reasoned, good explanation. You observed properly. Well done. All right, so I hope I've shown you that I have infused this demonstration with passion and enthusiasm, and this is what we want our teachers to do, or anybody who is doing anything. We want them to say that this is what physics is, this is why I love it, and this is why you want to be interested in it, because it's useful and exciting. And that's what I believe we want in our students and generally in our lives. We want passion to push us forward and take us in the right direction. I now would like to argue that a teacher's job is not so much a coach as maybe more like the captain of a ship, like a sailing ship, and that our job is to harness the winds of passion, and that we should all be working to pull together on this adventure of learning. Thank you.